Hey everybody, this is Greg-Petix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the Petixonian Institute of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to look at The Seduction of Mike by R. Sikoryak and Michael Smith, with a lot of help from Bob Sikoryak. He actually should have been credited on the cover. He draws almost half of the issue, but I don't know why. It's just R. Sikoryak. Bob, his brother, does a lot. This is a 1997 Fantagraphics publication, and I'm going to read the back cover here because it's hard to describe this comic in my own words. It's a very strange, weird little curio in comics history. A major retrospective of Mike's entire comics career, from his earliest appearances in the playful funnies of the Great Depression to his complex participation in the graphic literature of today, with detailed coverage of every genre that rose and fell in the 6 intervening decades. So what this is, I mean, if you know R. Sikoryak's work, he's always very playful and does interesting stuff with comic book history. But I guess the artifice of this book is that there's this guy named Mike, who is Michael Smith, who was a performance artist. I guess he was buddies with R. Sikoryak. But supposedly, according to this comic, he was in... It's almost like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where all these comics that we read in comics history, people acted in them or posed for them or something. So Michael Smith, Mike, was around in 1938 or whatever comics started, or 1936. And over the years, he chose different roles. Sometimes he'd be in superhero comics. Then he decided, no, I want to be in Archie type comics. So it's a very weird, high concept comic book. And it has this introduction by David Mark, who I think is fake. This is like acting like he's in on the gag. He says how he met Mike in 1938 at the DC Comics offices. And Mike, here's a photo of him, he tried out for the part of Jimmy Olsen as if it was like a role, but he didn't get it. Some redheaded guy got it. So, over the next 40 years, he spent the war with he watched Mike as he spent the war with Sergeant Rock, fighting the Nazis. He came home and signed up with the Justice Legion of Superstars, and his superhero name was the 5 O'Clock Shadow. Then in 1955, sorry about that, he decided to do Archie comics. And there was gossip that he was romancing Betty and Veronica. First one at a time, then in tandem. And then there was even Jughead rumors. So Mike was, he did a lot of crazy stuff. So he spent the next, 10 years or so in these kiddie comics, hanging out with Richie Rich, Little Lulu. But then in the 60s, the late 60s, he joined the underground movement and started appearing, quote unquote, in underground comics. And that's just a little intro to kind of give you a feel of this high concept. So now here the comic really starts. And all it is R. Sikoryak, showing off his amazing skills at mimicry. And we see 1938. It was the first appearance of Mike in Wii Comics, which is like, those comics back, before Superman. They were just like funny reprints of, comic strips and some like silly little funny strips. Then he joins DC, which of course is called something else. Mid-level action. And, he's basically the office manager for this group of superheroes, the Justice Legion of Superstars. So Mike is always doing these very mundane things. He's just this goofy guy, kind of boring, who always gets swept up in all these classic comics. Here he is at Fuzzy Funnies, because, as parodying Dell Comics, Funny Animal Comics. Next we got Shanna, the Jungle Empress. And she's rescuing Mike. We he starts doing work for crime comics, which were very huge back then. This is 1947 now. Real dope on crime. I thought there was more time in the meteor, but I was dead wrong. These cops are just massacring all these other criminals, but all the bullets are missing Mike. Nothing ever really happens to Mike. He's just always in the background. It's he's kind of like a Forrest Gump-like character who's just like traversing through comic book history. Then we have him in a romance comic, Tragic Temptations, and he's the unwanted suitor of this woman who wants love. And we're getting to the 50s now. We have an homage to Harvey Kurtzman's war comics, Atomic Tales, and Mike's just in the background getting blown up by all this TNT. Still in the 50s, sci-fi, was a big thing then. Very Wally-Wood-like homage. Mike's sitting there, and even though he's in this horrible situation where this alien has kidnapped him, the brain robbers from outer space, he's thinking, I wonder if I unplug the iron. Very mundane character, this Mike. He's in the Crypt of Opportunity, homage to the horror comics, pre-code horror comics. But this is just his job interview. But it's this hellish job interview. There's a skull in the coffee pot. Let me heat that up for you. And Mike is nonplussed. He's just like, oh, well, whatever. Even though he looks like he's in hell, all these zombies are interviewing him for a job. This is obviously an homage to the, after the comic code came around, EC tried to, clean up. And they had a lot of comics like this, like psychoanalysis. So this is Subpoena. And he pleads the fifth. So now here, this is why it's so weird that John Sikoryak is not credited. He does this huge comic in the middle, which kind of shows the life story of Mike. It's drawn very little John Stanley, Little Lulu style. And he's in prison. Little Lulu's there. And he basically starts talking about his whole life. We see that first comic he was in. He's saying the same exact thing on the cover of We Comics. Coffee, a meal in itself. But then because he drinks so much coffee, he misses a job interview. He's late for his job. He's kind of a screw-up. He's a well-intentioned guy, but he's kind of a screw-up. But we have tons of cameos here. We got Little Hot Stuff, Casper. And he has to pick up the laundry for the Legion, whatever the hell they're called. That superhero group he's the office manager for. They're all giving him shit. And he has all these, stand-ins for the superheroes, like Superman's Superior. And Batman is BM. Ms. W is Wonder Woman. I've never seen Bob Sikoryak before. I've seen many R. Sikoryak, but he's really good. He's almost as good a mimic as his brother is. We see Plastic Man. Of course, he's got different haircuts so they don't get sued. And, we just follow his life. He's hanging out with the Robin. His name's Robbie. It's obviously Robin. And all the other superheroes are busy, so he's off on this mission with Robbie. We got this, spirit type guy. And he's talking about hanging out with Shanna, the Jungle Queen. Everyone's ribbing him about, ooh, you're going to get lucky? I hear you're taking her on a date. And he shows up at this one place. It's the three horror hosts from EC Comics. And there's so many cameras here. We got the Flash. So finally he gets fed up and he just wants to quit. He's so tired of taking care of these superheroes, being their babysitter. So he goes off to the jungle. He's basically office managing her jungle. He stacked all the coconuts and the fruits. And she's like, thanks. and he's going to take her to this big dance. And at this dance, we have all these great comic characters. We got Jughead and Archie are smoking reefer in the bathroom with Robbie, and Mike gives him the what for. He's kind of a square. He's a square G, you know. And he grabs the joint from Robbie, and then right then the superhero team busts the wall, and the spirit guy is like, yeah, that's the guy I saw at Mom's place, the restaurant where they sell heroin. So they say, Mike, you're fired, and not only that, they turned him in, so he's in the prison, and that's how he gets in prison. Little Lulu takes off her wig, and it looks like Tubby, but a very seedy Tubby. Mr. Natural shows up, and then he says, oh, Shanna's actually here to pay your bail, but I got some bad news. So Shanna's dating Robbie now, that little turd. And she basically posted bail just so he could be there, help her, like their chauffeur. So now we continue after that little comic. We're in the 50s now. Parody of World's Finest. And, Superman and Superior and BM and Robbie are in this crazy situation like all those 50s DC comics. And Mike is saying, I quit. So he does some other stuff, He wanders around, so here he is in obviously like an Atlas Western, a beautiful parody of like that era's John Severin art, late 50s John Severin. The Kid Rides Alone. And then we have a parody of Classics Illustrated, Candide by Voltaire. And, God, he's such a good mimic, man. All the shit looks perfect. And Mike starts hanging out in Riverdale, which is called Hilldale High here. And then the Marvel comic starts. Here's an obvious, really good homage to like Kirby. Marvel Comics, The Quest Men. And it shows all these dynamic superheroes doing all this action. It's just wanted Mike, dead or alive. Like, he's such a nebbish, but he's always in the middle of all this crazy shit. He did some time at Harvey, which here is called Ralph Comics, with Tiny Tutu, the ballerina brat. That could have been a Harvey character, I'm sure. I love how Little Lotta is called Little Load here. That's her name. And, but then here it is. We get to the late 60s, and Mike goes underground. And he's in the first issue, or second issue of Zonk Comics. Obviously, Zap. Very good art crumb parody. That's pretty dead on. He's really good. Then we get to the relevant era of DC, the late 60s, early 70s, when DC was trying to be relevant. And it's like kind of this Neil Adams parody. Really well done. It's just nonsense. There's a protest. They're like, Mike now, free Mike. And Superman saying, if you lay a finger on Mike, we'll have a riot on our hands. Then we got, still early 70s, we got the Monster Boom sludge thing. And Mike is helping Swamp Thing clean up the swamp. I'm sorry, sludge thing. Really good Bernie Wrightson parody. Then mid-70s, we got Red Sonja parody from Wonder Comic Scoop, which is Marvel. And Mike is just still, even though he's in this barbarian world, he's still just a little nerd. We got Star Wars from Marvel Comics from the 80s. Strategic Defense Initiative. I like that. And of course, Mike is, all this action's going around, but Mike is just kind of doing some mundane shit. This is so good. So now Mike is, he's in Raw magazine, but it's called Rag. This is such a good Mark Beyer parody. Everything about it it's perfect. It looks like it could be a Raw comic from the time. Does a Love and Rockets thing. Perfect logo. Love and Mufflers. And shows all these Jaime Hernandez-like characters. I don't know what the hell Mike's doing there. We got Dark Knight Returns parody. And, of course, you know, Bat, B-Man, and Superior doing all this crazy shit. And Mike's just like, this is where I get off. Leave me alone. We have an American Splendor parody. American Slacker. And, Mike kind of fits in this world pretty good. Because, you know, American Splendor was very mundane tales of normal life. But Mike is Harvey Picar's neighbor in this, and he's obviously one of those neighbors who comes over and oversees his welcome. And Harvey's just like, shut the fuck up. Let's get out of my apartment. And then for some reason, the very last page, we have a complete reprinting of the Comics Code Authority's, what is it, their manifesto? All the rules you can't do since when the Comic Code started. So it's kind of a comment on the Comics Code Authority, how comics changed. But basically, it's just this weird, you know, I hate to say it because it's so overused, but it is very Forrest Gump-like, where he's just this good dude who somehow stumbled into every comics trend over 6 decades of comics history. And he was there for all of them. And all beautifully drawn. Well, not all, but all the parodies are so beautifully drawn by Sikoryak. They're so dead on. He's so good at that. Just imitating certain artist styles. And I've never seen Michael Smith do another comic before. He's basically a performance artist. Did lots of videos. And, but yeah, this Bob Sikoryak. Never seen him. I should look him up, see if he did more comics, because he's great. Seems like he's a chip off the old block. This is a great parody. This looks like John Stanley drawing this crazy comic. And it's really funny, too. So if you can find this, I think it's way out of print. The Seduction of Mike. And it's Fantagraphics, but it's out of print. But I don't think it's that much money. Nobody talks about this comic. I think nobody cares. Because, you know, I guess it's barely a comic, except for those 8 pages. It's mostly just like a funny little parody thing. But I love it. It's good stuff. And if you love comic books, I think you'll like this. Because it really, with a laser-like beam, it's amazing satire and parody of so many comic books. And it's like they say, you know, you can't really do good satire unless you really love what you're skewing. Like Harvey Kurtzman in Mad. He loved that shit. That's why he was so good in making parodies of it. Because he loved it. And he knew it inside out. So when he did parody it, it was dead on. And that's what this reminds me of. So, hope you liked the video. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.